Welcome to part 3. The last aspect of the ethos appeal that we're going to discuss is the issue of inclusive language. Now, that term has a lot of political baggage, but it can influence your effectiveness as a writer quite a lot. Let's start by defining the term. Inclusive language means that you use terms and phrases that are generally understood to include every potential audience member equally. Gender inclusiveness is the most common type of inclusive language, but it often also relates to race, disability, and sexuality, among other things. So, for example, instead of saying mankind, which many people feel excludes women, you would choose the term humankind. If you were using an example of a situation in college, let's say, you wouldn't say every student buys his books online. Instead, you might say every student buys his or her books, or even her or his books online. Or you could make it plural and say all students buy their books online. Any of these options would include both men and women as potential students in your example. With inclusive language, we also try to avoid stereotypes and use terms for groups of people that those people themselves find acceptable. For example, the term Oriental is seen as demeaning when it's used to describe people of Asian descent. It's much better to say Asian, Asian American, or even a country-specific term like Vietnamese or Chinese American, whichever is most correct or accurate. In academia, as in most businesses and governmental agencies, inclusive language is the norm and it is expected. You'll find that professors expect inclusive language in coursework and academic publications expect it in the articles and books that they publish. Most students understand this easily and they comply because it's something that they're already used to doing. But some people do have questions or concerns about inclusive language, so I'd like to address a couple of the common questions that I occasionally get asked. What about free speech? Free speech has to do with the laws that are passed in this country. It's not illegal to use language that excludes people, just as it's not illegal for someone to tell you that your language excludes people or that it is offensive. Professors, like business owners, have the right to tell you what language is or isn't acceptable in their courses, in their university, or in the case of business owners, in their place of business. If you choose to use that language that they feel excludes people, they may choose to fire you or penalize you with a bad grade. Or in the case of persuasive writing or speaking, they might just stop reading or listening to what you have to say. I don't think that the term mankind excludes people. Not every person is going to agree on whether each and every term is exclusive or hurtful, but some terms are generally considered to be unacceptable, even if you personally don't find them a problem. You may not have had the personal experience of being on the wrong end of that term like other people have, so it's a good idea to listen to the majority here. On the other hand, some terms are still very much up for debate. For example, the terms Hispanic, Chicano, Latino, and Mexican American are still being debated by people here who trace their roots to Mexico. I've had conversations myself with students of Mexican descent who disagreed with each other about which term they preferred. I suggest, in that case, educating yourself as much as possible. Even try Googling the term and see what search results pop up. And then choose the term that you think is the best option for the audience that you're going to be addressing. You might be corrected. That's happened to me. But then you can learn from the experience and do better next time. I don't want to be forced to say something that I don't believe in. Sometimes people think that inclusive language, or political correctness as some people call it, means that their opinions or ideas are being censored. Which opinions and beliefs exactly are under attack has changed from decade to decade. At the moment, probably the biggest issue involves homosexuality or gay rights. It is true that when governments or religious institutions have begun oppressing people historically, they often begin by restricting the language that people use. So I have sympathy for people who are sensitive to this. But I also think it's possible to see a boogeyman where there isn't one. Take, for example, the issue of a woman changing her last name. Suppose you believe that a woman should take her husband's last name when she gets married. Does that mean you can't talk to someone who chose not to take their husband's last name? Does it mean you can't call her by the name that she's chosen? Or reverse the situation. Maybe you believe that no woman should change her name when she gets married. Do you call all married women by their original names, their maiden names, in order to protest what they've done? Or do you just accept that their choices are different than yours, and while you don't agree, you can still respect the language that they've chosen for themselves? As I pointed out with the free speech question above, I think that there's a difference between being forced to say something and choosing to say something so that you can remain in conversation with the people that you disagree with. As always, if you have questions or want to discuss this further, please shoot me an email or post in the discussion board.